Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Football Fandemic, where this week we are going to be plugging away at those 2-2 teams, figuring out which ones are on the rise, which ones are diving. We're also going to look at the last week of games. We're going to look forward to the next week of games. We're going to talk about news, all that and more here on the Football Fandemic. Guys, football is starting to get exciting again for at least this guy whose team is finally starting to look like a team. But more than that, just some good games this last week. I'm excited to get into talking about those. But how are you guys before we start here today in your respective states and places?
Yeah, well, Arizona's 110 degrees right now, but not as hot as the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh,
so we're rolling.
He told us it was 110 degrees, and I said, and yet you're wearing a hat. But I guess he's inside where there's air conditioning, right? You're not in the 110. But that was a great line. Not as hot as the Minnesota Vikings.
Thank you.
Whoa! Now, we're going to get to all of it later. But Brandon, how are you doing there in the state of Wisconsin?
Things are good. It's 65 degrees, a little bit cooler than Arizona. It's perfect football weather.
Okay, I thought you were going to say, but not as cool as the Green Bay Packers.
As Joe Burrow.
That's Joe Burrow. Good. Matty Ice. Or no, wait, Matty Ice. That's a different guy. He's not there anymore. Atlanta Falcons. Well, things are good here in Illinois as well. We're actually having very nice moderate temperatures. I think, I don't know what the temperature right now is, but I think it's 70-something today. 69 right now. There you go. Beautiful weather. That's my favorite. People tell me, oh, yeah, we need it to be like 10 degrees warmer. I'm like, shut up. 69 is perfect. 70 is perfect. Well, hey, we're going to get into some games and such, but we're going to start, as we usually do, with some news, rumors, and rumblings of things happening around the NFL and talk about those a little bit. I'm going to start off with, I was telling the guys before this podcast started, Jared Goff played a perfect game, and I was told he did not play a perfect game. He merely didn't drop any passes, and he had a pretty good, almost perfect passer rating, but for I forget what it was, 155 something instead of 158.
Yeah, his official passer rating for the game was 155.8, and a perfect passer rating is 158.3. He was right there on the cusp.
Which is a crazy little number, and yet most real football fans know 158.3. Isn't that weird that they came up with that? Anyway, but he did not drop a pass. He threw 18. All 18 were completed. He even completed one by catching the 19th that was thrown by, who threw that one? Amon St. Brown?
Yeah.
Amon-Ra, yep.
Amon-Ra St. Brown. Wait. Yes. And he got a touchdown. So I read somewhere that he set some kind of record as far as like completion, receiving, and something that hasn't been done since like, the reforming of the NFL Super Bowl era.
I think it's most completed passes within a game that there were no incompletions. So like not like those early years where it's where somebody might go 7 for 7, but 18 for 18. I think like the record for most consecutive is 22 or 23, and David Carr of all people did that. But
wasn't
Drew Brees is up there somewhere too.
Yeah, I remember hearing somebody else like getting to that 22 mark, and they're like, "This could," but then they never. And
yeah,
I can't remember why did I feel like it was Kirk Cousins? Could have been anyway. As it stands, but I did see and I didn't save it on my phone, but I saw a stat that like when you add in his receiving of a touchdown, he has done something that hasn't been done and probably won't be done for another 40 years. They listed somebody else who did something like that. Anyway. Jared Goff, congratulations. Lions did win. I forget which of us predicted that last time against Seattle. It was a burner of a game in that Geno Smith wasn't out there slouching. It was his defense that was letting him down, but it's good to see. All right. Von Miller out 4 games. That's a big deal because Buffalo is hot right now, looking good, and they need everything they can get because they laid an egg against the Ravens, didn't they? Not laid an egg, but it didn't look good versus the Ravens. That was the Sunday night game that I was like, this one you've got to watch. And the Ravens came back. Remember, the Ravens started 0-2. These last two games, they've looked a lot more what I expected of the Ravens.
Yeah.
So
Buffalo fell victim to Derrick Henry in that one,
Yes.
almost 200 yards. But like, I think the Bills should be okay still. They played most of the season last year without Von Miller having like a tremendous impact when he was in the game. And Gregory Rousseau is really, really good. And so is Ed Oliver on that defensive line. So I think they're going to be fine as long as they can rebound from whatever last week was.
Yeah. And I forget who they play this coming week. I feel like it's somebody. It's Houston.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not necessarily an easy anymore. It used to be if somebody played Houston, you're like, well, that's an automatic win. Like for the last few years before last year, few years before last year. Now here's the thing: Buffalo has somebody out for 4 games, but I feel much better, like Josh was saying, about them than I do this next team. They have DeMarcus Lawrence out for 4 games, and for some reason, I don't feel as good about the Cowboys going forward. They won this week against the Giants, but it wasn't like by a lot. It looked like it barely got there, and that's the Giants. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I never think the Giants are good anymore. It feels like they haven't been in forever.
It appears right now the only thing the Giants have going for them is Malik Neighbors. They're doing a quarterback carousel right now. I think Daniel Jones is out, and Matthew's favorite confusing quarterback, Drew Lock, is in.
For the history and for Josh here, who wasn't around when I was having all this confusion, for some reason, keeping those two quarterbacks separate in my mind was so hard. And then they got on the same team, and it got even harder. And then one replaced the other one, and I'm just like, oh no, the whole world's confusing. I don't know what's going to happen. But on that kind of note, Malik Neighbors may not even be playing. He's really the bright spot of their team. And if he has a concussion that doesn't get solved, he won't be playing this next week. And that makes everybody in New York think, well, what are we watching for? What is it exactly we're tuning in to see this next week? And who do they play?
And what am I coming in watching for? I drafted him on my fantasy team. And just like everyone else on my fantasy team, Malik Neighbors, who's been doing fantastic.
Not Drew Lock.
No, not Drew Lock. Definitely not Drew Lock. Definitely not Daniel Jones either. I've been rocking with, as people know by now, Jaden Daniels, who's been very good for my team.
Not a bad call.
Yeah, and so the 2 rookies on my team, which I'm notorious for almost never taking rookies.
Right.
The last rookie I took was Justin Jefferson, which turned out really well. And then I took a hiatus from rookies. And I come out with Malik Neighbors and Jaden Daniels. And I'm all in for prayers being answered, but I'm just saying, if you're a rookie and I drafted you, you're gonna make some money.
Let me ask this real quick. On that note, Josh, you play fantasy football?
I do. I have two different teams.
Who was the last rookie you drafted?
Oh, I drafted a bunch of rookie. I like drafting rookie wide receivers late after I get my 2 like studs early. So
I'm not talking about this year. I'm talking about prior to this year. Okay,
this year I got Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr. for both of my teams later in the round. So I think those are the only 2 rookie, or Roma Dunze I picked up. So I've been kind of rotating some of the rookies around.
I think the last rookie that I selected prior to this year, because I think I picked up A.D. Mitchell this year because I drafted an all Colts team. So you have to pick him up. Otherwise, you just don't have enough people on your roster. But anyway, I think the last one was Chris Olave. And he did really well. Olave?
Yeah, he did well for you.
Yeah, he did. So what else we got here? Oh, probably the biggest news, at least in this forum at all, is, do you want to take this one, Brandon?
Yeah, I'll take this one. Everyone knows I'm a big historic fan of Devontae Adams. There was a couple of years in there where I was Matthew's primary source of information for Devontae Adams. Since he is no longer a Packer, I do not follow him as closely as I previously did, for obvious reasons. He has demanded a trade from the Raiders. The Raiders are listening to offers that seem really generous, actually. They're looking for a second and also a player. And that doesn't seem overly concerning. Devontae's come out and said he wants to go to one of two teams. And when you understand who the quarterbacks are of these teams, it makes sense. The first team he stated was the New York Jets. We know Devontae and Aaron have had one of the best quarterback receiver combinations in the modern era of football. Just complete dominance between the two of them anywhere against any defense. And we saw that at the peak of the San Francisco defense, triple man coverage, and we're still throwing to Devontae, and he's still getting 45 yards. It's completely insane what the two of them could do. And the other one is a quarterback that he has a lot of trust in, which was his quarterback before Aaron Rodgers, meaning college football, with Mr. Carr down in New Orleans. So he has stated outright he would prefer one of those two teams.
I thought I heard he also said he would be in consideration of Pittsburgh for some reason. I was like trying to think why. Why Pittsburgh?
I think the news on that was Pittsburgh came out and said, we're very interested, and he wouldn't be offended to go to Pittsburgh. But his preference is...
I wouldn't be offended. It's different than preference.
New York. Yeah, New York or New Orleans. New Orleans, yeah. Those are his two preferences. It makes sense. Those are the two quarterbacks that he respects most. We know he left Green Bay to go play with David Carr in Vegas, and then they cut him, put in our boy Jimmy G from EIU, and then threw him on the bench. So he has not played with the guy he's wanted to for quite some time. I'm excited for either option. I saw a crazy triple trade that was just proposed by a fan on X. There's no merit to this, but it's a triple trade with Atlanta, Vegas, and the Jets. And part of it involves Hassan Reddick, who has not finalized a contract with New York after being traded, sending him to Atlanta, sending picks from Atlanta to Vegas, and sending Devontae to New York.
Those kinds of three-way trades are just so ridiculously complicated, and
but it sounds fun, right? Because it solves an issue that the Jets have with a star player that is not signing a contract, sending him to a place that has what we assume the ability to get a reasonable contract done with him, sending Devontae to go in one of his primary choices, and sending the pick compensation to Vegas for what they wanted. It's a 3-win deal there, in my opinion. And I think it would be really fun to see. I know we don't see them often. I know, I get it, but it would be really fun to see, especially what is this week 5, and they have till week 8 to trade him if they're going to do an in-season trade. And I think that's what they're looking at. And before you bring it up, I do know, and I do understand he has a hamstring injury right now. I think the moment he gets traded, this is going to turn into that scene from Forrest Gump where he has leg braces on and he can't walk, running. And then all of a sudden he starts running and he's completely fine.
He just fell off.
Yeah.
So
he instantly makes.
Devontae did not care for Gardner Minshew. He did not have Minshew mania, it seems.
No.
I don't think there are too many wide receivers that do at this point. But if he goes to New Orleans, that offense instantly, as good as it was, like the first 2 weeks, like that could potentially be the norm. You have Rashid Shaheed taking the top off, and then Olave underneath, and then Devontae Adams just doing whatever he wants.
Yeah.
or with the Jets. I mean, Adams and Garrett Wilson probably become the best 1-2 combo in the league, I would think. I mean, I don't have it off the top of my head, but that would be a very, very good combo. So,
and Mike Williams as well. People forget him being in New York. Now he's the third guy on the totem pole. What a great problem to have.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is, you feel like Aaron Rodgers has some weapons, but obviously he needs one more because, man, last week, 9-10 loss. That's ridiculous. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So Devontae Adams, Willie, Won't he? You know, we all have seen the clip over and over of Aaron Rodgers signing the golf ball saying, yeah, I can't wait to play with him again, as though it's going to happen. And so we know Aaron Rodgers would be up for it. In other news, Will Levis, one of the greatest quarterbacks that ever lived, might be out, it looks like, for good old Mason Rudolph. It was kind of sad. He got, well, not sad that he got a concussion. I don't know if he got a concussion. He was knocked out, but not before he threw one of his sneaky, interceptions there. Got that in before he went out. Luckily, Mason Rudolph came in, and then crazily, they beat the Miami Dolphins, leaving one 0-4 team in this whole entire league, and that is the Jaguars, which I would not have thought would be all defeated.
Yeah,
before Tennessee. Man, I did not expect that. But Will Levis looks like he went out last game. We don't know. Will he stay out? My guess is they have to be looking at this and thinking this isn't working. So
yeah, when you have a quarterback in Will Levis that has iconic photos from every game of him messing up, so iconic you could hang them in the Louvre. I think that's a sign to say, all right, let's put this guy down a bit. Let's just develop him, and let's throw in Mason Rudolph, who has done okay football before. I would not call what Will Levis was doing as okay football.
No. And he says the image this week is him mouthing, I didn't see the guy, like pretty clearly. Like I just didn't see him coming. And like that to me is as iconic or infamous as Sam Darnold in New York saying that I see ghosts, or I'm seeing ghosts out there. I think that is something that can like set him back from like a confidence and mental standpoint. Now that everybody knows like he's this guy, I just wasn't able to read the defense well, and he's done that every single week. I know that Brian Callahan said that as long as Levis is healthy, he's going to be the starter. But Rudolph hasn't played like good quarterback, but he's won games before with Pittsburgh, so it might just be the best idea to roll with the hot hand, so to speak. So I don't know.
And it's like Brandon said, a couple weeks in a row, this development needs to happen with some of these quarterbacks. Will Levis is one of those. He has a lot of like athletic ability. He can throw a ball really far, but he needs to like get his mind in the right place and some of those fundamentals, it looks like. So maybe he'll get the chance. And we've already talked about this last one. Malik Neighbors, concussion, may not be playing this next week. Brandon's hoping that he does come back. And so is everybody in New York who's not rooting for the Jets.
I hope he comes back and scores 7 touchdowns this week. That would be fantastic.
That would be for you. And for a lot of other people, I suppose. Well, let's get on. Unless you guys have any other news that I did not kind of mention here, or anything that you're like, hey, this happened this week. And it can be rumors and rumblings because we do those here. We don't have to like prove anything. We can just say stuff. I hear the Colts are going to win the Super Bowl. What? All right. Well, on that note, let's move to where are we now? After 4 weeks of games, where are we? And kind of the title of this show is The Confusing Case of the 2-2s, right? We got a whole bunch. I counted up before the show, 13 of the 32 teams are at 2-2. And that's kind of normal this time of year, right? You get a lot of everybody kind of looks like they're in that big middle, but it's going to start sifting out. So we want to start here among this group, the three of us, to decide which of these 2-2 teams is for real and on the rise, and which of these 2-2 teams, that's a mirage and that's going to look worse before everything's done. So we're going to talk about that. But before we get into the 2-2 teams, I just want to say this. We got 2 4-0 teams. We're going to talk about one of those in depth in a little bit when we kind of review games from this last week. The other one, no surprise, Kansas City Chiefs. And I hate this because everybody's like, Kansas City Chiefs are playing horrible. Oh, yeah. Patrick Mahomes doesn't look as good as he usually does. Travis Kelce's not doing anything, and yet they're 4-0. Everybody's like talking about them like they're playing horribly, yet they're 4-0. Yeah. So I hate the fact that when they get playing in their groove, they're still 4-0. I hate it so bad. Yeah. Sorry, all you Kansas City fans.
And now no Rashee Rice too. So
right, they have so many injuries, and they're 4-0.
Yeah, they're one of those teams that they're on the phone with Vegas every morning. hey, we'll give you this. We'll give you this. We want Devontae so bad. We just need someone that can catch the ball.
Man, I'm surprised he hasn't said I would go to Kansas City, because why wouldn't you? I don't care if you don't like, if you're a wide receiver, why wouldn't you want to go to, or if you're anybody who doesn't want a Super Bowl ring, right?
Right.
So anyway, so we've got two 4-0 teams, the Vikings being the other one. We're going to talk a little more about them in depth in just a bit. We got 7 3-1 teams, and I don't have them listed here, but we'll kind of reference them from time to time. We've got 13 2-2 teams we are going to talk about, and then we have 9 1-3 teams. Only one 0-4 team, and it is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Since there's so few of them, we can name those really quickly. One, and it's Jacksonville. And I was just surprised that Tennessee beat them to the first win, especially with how much of that game they led against the Texans. Right up until the last couple seconds, they were like in the lead, and then.
Does Jacksonville have their first round pick this year, or do they trade it to the Bears or something?
Ooh, I don't know.
Right.
It would make sense that the Bears would somehow end up with everybody's first round.
I believe this year everybody, as of right now, has their own first round pick.
Really?
I believe so.
And the longest outlier in that data was the Rams, right?
Yeah.
They just it was gone forever.
They traded those picks. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one thing that you hate, because in the AFC South, we have an inordinate amount of number 1 picks over the last few years because I guess Chicago got those from the Texans, right? And never mind.
Yeah.
Carolina had one. Okay. Forget what I just said there. My wife is calling me. So you guys talk about something real quick while I just make sure this isn't something important.
Well, yeah,
let's go ahead. Let's go name the 2-2 teams, and then we'll continue on. So I've got here, in whatever order ESPN has them in their NFL standings. So we have the New York Jets, the Atlanta Falcons, the Indianapolis Colts, the New Orleans Saints, the Baltimore Ravens, the Dallas Cowboys, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Denver Broncos, the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, and last but not least, the San Francisco 49ers.
Did we just list the 2-2 teams?
We did. Yes.
Okay. I missed it, but I'm sure
the Colts were in there.
The Colts are in there.
The Packers are in there. And I just went off the order. ESPN has them ranked on their website.
Okay, so let's start talking about them. Start with whatever the first team is. Let's basically, we're going to say, I think this team's on the rise. This team's going to do better than everybody expected, or this team is going down. This was a fluke that they look like they're, possibly in a place to win. Okay.
All right. New York Jets, gut feeling.
Yeah, they're going up. I mean, especially if they get Devontae Adams, and even if they don't. Last week's game was in the rain, and they just couldn't get the ball rolling. We still saw Aaron Rodgers make a lot of really vintage Aaron Rodgers throws off platform and all of that. And if it's different conditions, and if their kicker makes a field goal, they win that game. And I know that's a lot of ifs, but I think more often than not, moving forward, they will have those ifs come to fruition.
Yeah, talk about another Aaron Rodgers kicker situation. Never seen those before. All right, next team.
Just Aaron Rodgers. I think the Packers in general. We might.
We'll get to that. You don't have to worry about that. The Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, I think maybe they're going to be a little higher, but it's tough because they're in that division with Tampa Bay and New Orleans that it's just very foggy. But I feel like they're going to be a little, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, maybe.
It depends on which Kirk Cousins shows up. We've seen him. What was the game he played where he led the team to victory on Monday night?
Against the Eagles.
Eagles. Like, that was such an impressive drive from Kirk Cousins, and we need more of that if they're going to show up and be a competent playoff team, or
Seems
even
like the Eagles
contend
are just
for a
having
division
trouble
title
against the NFC South, because this last week they just looked horrible again to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right, Tampa Bay came back and squashed them, and
And that drive for Atlanta, they're close to being 4-0. They're close to being 0-4. It's a Kirk Cousins teams where the variance is that wide. But that last drive, the game-winning drive against the Saints, was a 5-yard completion, 5-yard penalty against Atlanta, 30-yard pass interference penalty, incompletion, 58-yard field goal. So it wasn't as if Kirk Cousins led this fantastic game-winning drive. That offense did not score any of the touchdowns. It was a special teams touchdown and a defensive touchdown. So I have concerns about the offense, especially because he had a clean pocket for most of that game. He had time to throw the football, and he did make some good throws downfield, but it wasn't enough to lead the offense into the end zone a ton. And like, they were running the ball while they were doing everything pretty well, and just weren't able to get points. I'm a little bit down on them if Kirk Cousins looks like the Kirk Cousins we've seen so far this season.
All right. Matthew, this next team, Indianapolis Colts.
So obviously, as a homer, I want to say they're on the rise. And here's why I would say maybe I will stay with that. One, I think when Anthony Richardson is in there, they have not looked horrible. So we lost the first game of the season by 2 points, I think, and we lost the second game of the season pretty narrow margin. And then we won 2 games. But you could tell in this last game, and again, kind of getting into the homer games early here, but you could tell in this last game that when Anthony Richardson is in, Jonathan Taylor does great because they have to like watch the quarterback, and it's a lot easier for him to get out and run. Once Joe Flacco came in, Jonathan Taylor got shut down because they no longer had to worry about the quarterback running, right? Joe Flacco's not going to run. He's like Peyton Manning. It's like you just stand there and you throw it. But then Joe Flacco, when he came in, he can do those little short and intermediate passes really well, enough. And then he converted a lot of third downs. And so the thing that gives me hope is that if Anthony Richardson's healthy and he's in, I think Indianapolis is a pretty hard team to know how to defend with him in there. Especially if Anthony gets better at throwing those short and intermediates.
And he looked really good this for the drive and a half that he was out there this last week. Like he didn't have those inaccuracy, like that first play where he just the touch pass, and that's it's a deep intermediate route. Like that's something that I feel like he's been missing more often this season. But like if he starts to get that down, like Anthony Richardson becomes one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, I think. And I like the Colts. They were my AFC South pick. And their run defense has stepped up. The first game and a half, the run defense was non-existent. Halftime at that Packers game, I'm not sure what happened. They were able to kind of really slow down the run, and then they haven't given up big plays to DeAndre Swift. And it seemed like every time Najee Harris got a handoff this last week, it was like right into a brick wall, which might be Najee Harris because Cordell Patterson had a good game before he got injured. But their run defense is much improved, and that was their biggest weakness in those 2 losses.
Right. And so the thing that kind of puts me on the edge of they might be on the up and up is if Anthony Richardson continues to get hurt and leave games, Joe Flacco's not a bad backup to have because he may not be mobile and it may like limit what they can do on the offense, but he is pretty technically, he can hit routes. Yeah. I mean, he can hit throws. And so
he's really smart too.
Yeah, it may turn into more of like one of those Tom Brady, New England games where it was like tons of short, fast passes to get down the field. But I think he can do that, and he doesn't get flustered. He's not going to get overwhelmed. And if we can just keep Anthony Richardson healthy, I think we have a better offense with Anthony Richardson. But I think Joe Flacco's a good backup. Hopefully, we don't have to go to a backup for the whole season like we did last year. So I'm going to say up. I'm going to say Anthony Richardson gets better. I'm going to say he doesn't get injured every time, and Colts move up.
If he does get injured every time, Matthew, I'm happy to give you Malik Willis for a first-round pick.
I'm happy to decline.
All right, let's take a look here at our next team, the New Orleans Saints. I'll go first on this one. I think they're more on the up. Matthew alluded to it earlier. They're in a NFC South division that we really didn't have much expectation for going into the season, us being the podcast. But they've overall not been horrible. Alvin Kamara is starting to have a resurgence. from what we've seen from 2 or 3 years ago. He's been relatively quiet the past couple seasons, and having that run game with the addition of Derek Carr, not having Jameis Winston out there has been huge. And if they get Devontae Adams, we talked about this, is they have already good players that can take the top off and get underneath opposing defenses. Devontae Adams can do both of those. And as an offensive coordinator, I'd be thrilled to have him on my team to have even more options of taking away defensive players.
Yeah, and I think it's what Derek Carr are you going to get? The last 2 weeks, he's been the Falcons like rushed 3 at him the whole game and just played coverage so that he wouldn't throw anything downfield. And it was dump off, screen. There just wasn't anything there for him. And we saw him become a lot more aggressive the first 2 weeks of the season where they were putting up 40 points per game each week. But I think I think they're an even keeled team. I think they are what they're going to be, like about 500, 8-9, 9-8, something along those lines. But if Derek Carr gets more aggressive, or I don't know if it's him or if it's the offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, because Kubiak used to be the Vikings offensive coordinator for 1 year. And the first 2 games of that season, Kirk Cousins was taking a lot of deep shots. Rest of the season, the offense was a little bit more vanilla. So I don't know if it's Carr, if it's Kubiak, but if they become more aggressive, their offense can be significantly explosive, and they compete with the Buccaneers for the South title.
So I look at when you have two and two teams in the NFC South, you want to say, oh, this one looks good. This one looks good. I feel like this could be a little bit better, but somewhere in there, somebody's not going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is going to be like one of those NFC South has 3 people in the playoffs or 3 teams in the playoff. I don't think that's going to happen. Obviously, I don't think the Panthers will be there. But when it comes to Saints and Falcons, I feel really, it's like Josh said, I feel like both of these teams are probably going to end up about 8-8. But here's what I'll say. I think the Saints are not going to ascend. But if they get Devontae Adams, I will reframe that answer in a different light. Okay.
All right. I agree. All right. This next team, I'll start with this one. Baltimore Ravens. My opinion, they are on the up right now. They started off the season super rough. And probably the toughest game they just had, we alluded to it in the opening segment of the podcast, against Buffalo, who the consensus was amongst the NFL that was the number 1 team to beat in the NFL. And they went in and manhandled Buffalo. It was such a dominant game by the Ravens. They're starting to understand and starting to click on offense and what they're trying to do, but they're also making key stops on defense. And so having the combination of those two, if they continue that trend, I'm looking really high at the Ravens to finish out the season.
They're a blade of grass away from being 3-1, and an epic collapse against the Raiders was really their only bad football that they've played so far. So I completely agree. The running game is there. The Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson combo is going to continue to light the world on storm and or light the world on fire. And
I like on storm.
Whatever. Yeah,
light the world on storm.
But yeah, so I am very, very big on the Ravens. I think even with them being a game behind the Steelers, they are probably still, for me, the favorite to win the AFC North.
Yeah, when Derrick Henry got traded to them, I felt like this is going to be a good team. And so the first 2 weeks, I was kind of like, what is going on? It did not feel right. I think they just had to start figuring out how to gel as a team still. Not just those two, but like the whole team they were still figuring it out. I think they're only going to continue to rise. I agree. Risers.
All right, I'm going to go next. Our next team is the Dallas Cowboys, and I am saying they are on the fall. For what I feel like ever since we've started this podcast, there's been some sort of consensus, not necessarily amongst the podcast, but amongst the NFL, that the Dallas Cowboys were the definitive best in their division. And that's really as long as I've been tracking the Cowboys, because I don't really care for America's team, quote unquote. Right now, they are not playing convincing football. They lost a ton of stuff over the offseason, refused to fill it in. And we're seeing the fruits of that because other teams have benefited from their previous players. And they're just on the fall. I think they're going to continue on the fall. I am not inspired that they're even going to come close to beating Washington out for the division. I just don't think it's going to be a close race. I think Washington easily takes the NFC East.
I think the biggest sure thing coming into the season for the Cowboys was their defense, and it has not been good so far. Like, they lost a lot of pieces on their offensive line, so you thought maybe the offense would take some step backs. They can't run the ball. They can't stop the run. They can't really stop anybody right now. They give up a ton of points to the Saints, and like, Mike Zimmer has not done what he did in Minnesota and transform that defense. Well, he didn't even need to transform it. He just needed to, put a couple more building blocks on top of it to make it even more elite. And so far it has gone in the opposite direction. And I don't think Mike Zimmer at this point in his career, in this era of the NFL, is the guy to get that figured out with enough time for them to make a run at the Commanders or the Eagles, whoever can kind of bout it out at the top up there.
I'm going to say fall also. And that is every year the NFL as a whole and just the world as a whole just has all these like high hopes for Dallas. That's what Brandon was mentioning, right? Every year they are like, Dallas is going to be awesome. And then every year Dallas like peaks somewhere and then falls off and doesn't make the playoffs. They've had a rough start. They lost to the Cleveland Browns 33-17. Cleveland has not shown itself to be a juggernaut this year with Deshaun Watson or whoever is starting there. They did beat New Orleans and look like they're doing pretty good, but then they barely beat the Baltimore Ravens, and then they lost to the Giants. And I just have a feeling when they face, I don't know about Pittsburgh next week. I know I have thoughts on like Pittsburgh getting still better. We'll see about that. But when they face the Detroit Lions, when they face the San Francisco 49ers, I think 49ers almost always have their number. I think it's just going to be tough sledding for them. And I think they're going to be out of the playoffs.
All right. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers.
I'll start with this one. I don't think they're there yet. So I really wanted Jim Harbaugh to come in and to be like, man, look what he did. He has made this amazing. He may get them kind of in line somewhere, but right now they're not inspiring. They seem to shoot themselves in the foot as often as anybody beats them. And I think they still have some growing to do. I don't think this is the year for them. I'm saying.
I know they're battling injuries right now, which is tough on any football team. According to most fantasy teams, all star players are battling injuries right now. But it's how they overcome that, right? And Matthew knows, Josh, you may not know yet, but I've been a huge fan of Herbert since he entered the league. His biggest fan, just out of pure talent of what he's able to do with the ball. And I know he has not quite had that coaching support staff around him. Harbaugh comes in. We kind of know him as an offensive guru in the history of the NFL, especially with quarterbacks. And he's done really, really well with quarterbacks. And so this was the first year I was like, oh my gosh, he has a quarterback-minded head coach. Let's just go see what he's able to do. I know they lost some pieces. They traded Keenan Allen to Chicago, very good receiver. They cut Mike Williams. He signed with the Jets. I know there were injury concerns there, but they didn't really backfill any of those positions. And so there's, again, a development problem within the organization for their offense that's not coming out and doing what they're supposed to do. I think this year they're on the fall, but with that fall also comes the blessing of higher draft compensation. And so if you're smart about it, you're able to go out and get some really good guys to develop over the next couple of years to build up the team. I know Harbaugh, he's big because he just won the national championship for college football. So he was just in that sphere playing against these guys that he's going to be drafting. Some of them, I assume, would be Michigan players. I have a personal thought that if Eberflus was cut in Chicago, Harbaugh went in there, I think they would have taken J.J. McCarthy first overall, just because that's Harbaugh's guy. That's his quarterback. And I'm still really high on J.J. McCarthy. It's a shame he's a Viking. But I think that's what we get out of Harbaugh, and I don't think this is their year. I think we're looking 2 to 3 years from now is when we're going to be shocked, if you want to put that in there, by the Chargers.
I like the Chargers to rise this year. I think Harbaugh, like when I look for good football teams, the offensive line for me is like the first thing to look at. And that's why like the Lions are so good. The first thing is their offensive line is that good. Joe Alt, when he was in the first 2 games, completely dominant. They have Rashawn Slater on the other side. He goes out in the middle of that Steelers game. All of a sudden, Justin Herbert gets hurt. You have Taylor Heineke coming into the game, and the Steelers pull that one out. I think Joe Alt, I'm just reading here, it says Chargers appear to have averted injury disaster with Joe Alt. So he gets back in there. He didn't play last week. He gets back in there, and that team is completely different. You go Justin Herbert, that kind of protection. You give J.K. Dobbins, who's been really solid running the football, for a coach that likes to run the football. You give him those guys to work behind. I think that offense can come to life a little bit more, even like without a number one receiver. Lad McConkey has looked pretty good. Quentin Johnson looks like he's taken a step forward this year, even after a abysmal rookie season. And on the other side of the ball, they still have Bosa, and they have Asante Samuel Jr. They have pieces there. I'm thinking like 10-7, and maybe sneak into a wild card spot for the Chargers.
All right, Matthew, you're the tiebreaker.
I went first, right? I think
you said.
Oh, you did
first.
Yep.
You did.
I think not this year. I think they're going to be better. I think this is still a year where they're learning each other, where Harbaugh's learning how Herbert and team work, and Herbert and team are still figuring out how Harbaugh works, and he's getting his pieces. And I think they're going to be good, but I don't think it's this year.
All right. Let's talk Las Vegas Raiders. You want to go first on this one, Josh?
Yeah, the Raiders, I'm not sold on. I'm not going to be sold on a team that has Gardner Minshew to do better than 500. I think that's kind of what Gardner Minshew does, is he plays good, he plays bad. He is not like this guy that's going to give you a consistent week in, week out performance, especially now without Devontae Adams. The offense doesn't look good. Like, they have 2 running backs that are basically the same guy, which are Alexander Madison and Zamir White. They're power guys that can't find holes in the offensive line, and they have a good offensive line. They just don't have guys with the vision to hit those holes consistently. And like, it's weird because usually you'll see a elusive guy and your power back, and you'll have that change of pace. It's just 2 guys in a row that are just going to try to ram their head against the wall. And if they can't get the running game going, that puts even more pressure on Gardner Minshew. They struggled against the Browns, who I think are bad. They did have the nice win against the Ravens, but I just don't trust Gardner Minshew, and I don't trust that running game.
I will say this. I was pretty amazed that they won this week without Devontae Adams, without Max Crosby, and without who's their other guy that's out. They had another dude out, and with all those, I thought, man, they're not going to be in this game at all, and then they were, and so. But I'm with you. I love Gardner Minshew. I don't see him as more than a middle of the pack quarterback right now, and especially if they don't hold on to Devontae Adams, it's going to be very easy to key in on who's their player he's trying to get the ball to, and it's going to be pretty bad. So, yep.
I agree. All right, let's move on to Philly.
I'm going to say I'm down on Philly. They have the talent, but it seems like right now the head coach and the quarterback aren't jiving. And we saw what that looked like in Minnesota during the end of Mike Zimmer's tenure, with Kirk Cousins and Mike Zimmer like not even having meetings with one another, and not even really talking to one another. And like every time Jalen Hurts is asked, what's your relationship like with Nick Sirianni, he kind of like gives a non-answer. And like a lot of quarterbacks will, even if they're not having a great, time with their head coach, they'll give you the standard PR answer was, oh yeah, I love him. Jalen Hurts is kind of just like dodging the question and dismisses it right away. And I don't know. Hurts also hasn't been helping his own cause. He's holding onto the football a lot and throwing a lot of bad passes and making a lot of mistakes. They have the players, they have the talent. I just don't think, as silly as it is, I just don't think the vibes are there right now for Philadelphia to get them out of any adversity that they face further into the season.
I'm gonna jump in second here, and I'm gonna say I agree. I think every year you have these people in your mind that you feel like they're powerhouses, and then somehow they fall off. And I feel like that's what the Eagles feel like this year to me. And we know in the NFC East, it's never the same team that comes out on top 2 years in a row, right? And I think this is the Commanders' year. They're going to come out on top in how it looks right now. Obviously, things can change, but I really get a feeling from the Philadelphia Eagles that it was this team that is felt to be a powerhouse now. Last year, they weren't as good as they were the year before. We were still trying to give them the benefit of the doubt this year, whether it's that relationship between quarterback and head coach or what, it just doesn't seem to be the year for them to continue to be that powerhouse with all of the changes that happen in the AFC. I don't see Dallas being the one that comes out on top. And so definitely not New York. I think Commanders are going to win that division. Where the Eagles fall, like, do they get into a wild card spot? I don't know. But I don't feel like when I say rising and falling, like, are they going to be what I thought they were before? No, I don't. So even if they go up a little bit, which they may, they're not going to be where they were.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are definitely going to finish above 500. I think they're going to be in that 9-8, maybe ceiling of 10 wins. I do think one of the reasons Jalen Hurts is holding onto the ball so long, primarily is because A.J. Brown is out with a hamstring injury right now. And he's a big X factor on that offense. I know you just brought in Saquon, and Saquon's been looking really good in
That's
Philly.
True.
And so I'm not counting them out. I do think they're missing their largest weapon on the outside with A.J. Brown. Once he's back in, I do think he's going to make a significant difference. I know Jason Kelce just retired, played a phenomenal career in Philly. So congrats to him on his retirement. And it's really hard to replace a guy like that. He was the biggest reason the brotherly shove worked. Right.
The brotherly shove. I thought it was the tush push.
I saw the brotherly shove on X, and I just thought it was the perfect name for it.
That for Philadelphia. Yep.
Yeah. Because Jason Kelce, shorter center. I mean, historically, they are not that short, and he did really well. He could get lower and push guys back just far enough to pick up 1 yard. And I know that's a tough loss for them. I know it was time for him to retire, so I can congratulate him on his retirement. But it's tough to replace that position. Matthew, I've talked about the center position very highly on this podcast for a long time. I think you have to arguably be either the first or second smartest guy on the offense to play center. You do so much in that position that regular fans just don't notice, and it's really hard to get right. And with a new guy in there, it's going to take adjustment. And so I got the Eagles on the rise. I don't have them as a Super Bowl powerhouse team, maybe like we might have had them coming into the season. But I still have them on the rise. I have them finishing second in the NFC East behind the Commanders.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about maybe the most surprising team that just took down Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, the Denver Broncos.
I don't know what to think of the Broncos. I'll tell you this. I did not expect them to do the 2 wins that they've done the last 2 weeks. Now, granted, last week was 10-9. I mean, I don't want to get overexcited about 10-9, but what they did in that 10-9 win was they were super physical defensively. Mm-hmm. They went in and just battered the Jets. They took out their biggest receiving threats. I feel like I didn't get to watch the whole game, but I feel like they were on Aaron Rodgers all night long. And So that for me is promising when you have a team that has a strong defense and their offense is starting to. Here's what I did see is Bo Nix was so excited at the end of that game. They won 10-9, which is nothing to write home about, and he's like out there. When they're doing their victory kneel down, whatever, he's jumping around, and you're like, that kid's excited right now because Aaron Rodgers was his idol or whatever. And,
Yeah.
But I don't know what to think of him yet. I know that we've had two wins. I don't know.
I'll go next on this one. I'm down on the Broncos. I don't think this is their year. If you look at the touchdown that Bo Nix threw, it was to an undefended receiver when he was not particularly under a ton of pressure. And so as a quarterback, that's like the bare minimum of your job, what to do. It wasn't a flashy 50-yard pass and double coverage. It was Cortland Sutton with no defenders for 10 to 15 yards. As a quarterback, you have to be able to make those throws. I haven't seen a ton of other stuff out of Bo Nix that gets me super excited about him. I haven't seen him succeed in a fast tempo situation, in a 2-minute situation. Like Matthew said, it was 9-10, and Josh mentioned earlier, we had a missed field goal in the rain, which makes it tough, right? And so I don't think he's able to quite control the game at the level that he should to elevate this team to their next level.
Yeah, a 7 for 15 for -7 yards at halftime for Bo Nix was what he did. And the uncovered receiver, he almost overthrew that receiver, and it was a toe touch catch that probably didn't need to be a toe touch catch. I don't like Bo Nix. I don't think he's going to have a good NFL career. I like the Broncos defense, what they were able to do against Breece Hall, shutting him down, and even Braylon Allen to a little bit. Allen had a better game, but the holes still weren't there really for him. But as long as Bo Nix is the quarterback, I do not see this team being anything more than a 6 or 7 win operation.
All right. The Green Bay Packers. I'm going to start with this team. And very much like Matthew, it's a homer pick. Longtime listeners of this podcast know I'm never going to dog on the Packers unless your name is Joe Barry. And so, I have the Packers as an up team. If you look at their 2 losses they had Philly week 1, Friday night in Brazil. Just an awkward situation to be playing a game on a soccer field. We know historically the NFL has not done well on those kinds of fields. And it wasn't a blowaway game for the Eagles. It was still a close game. The Packers had an opportunity to win the game. Jordan Love got injured on that final drive. We sent in Malik Willis, who we had just traded for 2 days before, and said, we just need you to go get 60 yards and win the game, which is really hard to do for a quarterback. And so I never counted the Packers out of that game. We'll get more into their loss this week against the Vikings. But at the end of that game, they were still not out of the game. It was still a close game. They had other issues that I'm not going to 100% put on the offense or the defense, maybe so on a kicker that we've alluded to a couple times. I think the Packers are on the up. I'm always going to give Matt LaFleur a nod. He is a genius on offense. We've seen what Jeff Hafley's been able to do with his defense in such a short amount of time. We lead the NFL in turnovers 4 weeks into the season. And we've already exceeded what we did last season with Joe Barry. And so we're still on the up. The team's still working on coming together. We know Jordan Love just came back from injury. He missed weeks 2 and 3. And so I'm still up on the Packers.
Yeah, as long as Matt sorry.
I was going to go second to give a good sandwich here so you could finish off with the other opposing view. So let me go second here. I feel like this. I feel like the Packers are going to go better than they are now because I think Jordan Love coming back makes a big difference. My question is what's going on with that division? Because right now the Vikings are hot and the Lions are looking good. And so you've got that to deal with, and you've already kind of fallen behind them. You're only behind by a game to the Detroit Lions.
Correct.
2 games to the Vikings. But those 2 teams are looking good. The Bears, Bears are also at 2-2, aren't they? Your whole division's kind of like all
Hey,
bunched up.
they're the next team. Let's not hop on them too quick.
Yeah, let's not hop on them too quick. We won't talk about them yet. But what I was going to say is, I think Jordan Love being back makes a difference. The problem is you got into a little bit of a hole with two other good teams in your division. I think that makes it really tough. So, do I think you will you get better as a team? Yes, I think the Packers will get better as a team with Jordan Love back. Will it be enough to surpass? I think that's going to be a fight all the way down the line.
And I think I think that's a good point, is the division. But for me, as long as Matt LaFleur is the offensive play caller for the Green Bay Packers, they could be 2-14, and I would still expect them to somehow make the playoffs. Like, he would find a way to pull six wins out of that last game. Despite what I just said about Bo Nix, I think you put him in the Packers. Like, if he was in the Packers offense, I think they still are a division winner potentially, because I have that much like respect for his play calling. I think he's up there, probably for me, even higher than Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan as the best play caller in the NFL. So I love the things that he does to just scheme wide receivers open. Well, I don't love it because I'm a Vikings fan, but if I was a Packers fan, I would love that.
And we do. We do love it.
And yeah, so I am up on them. I guess I will add the caveat. The only question is how much the rest of the division goes, but they're only 2 games behind the Vikings, only 1 game behind the Lions. It's a strong division, but Matt LaFleur has won this strong division before too. So I like the Packers.
It's going to be a fun season to watch these 3 teams, I think. Being in that division makes it more fun for me because I don't have like necessarily a dog in the race, but I'm watching 3 teams that it used to always be Packers, and then there was possibly Minnesota with Kirk Cousins, and the Detroit Lions were always horrible. The Bears were always horrible. And so now to see like 3 teams like really going to be fighting till the end, I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, if our 2 viewers are interested, let me know anytime there's a divisional game. I'll tell you what my heart rate was during the game and what it normally is. That'll really tell us where it's at. I'm sure if Josh monitors his heart rate as well, he'd be happy to share where his heart rate goes during the games. All right, let's stay within the NFC North. Let's round it out with the Chicago Bears. I'm going to start with this one. Let's do the same order. We'll go Matthew and then Josh. I'm never sold on the Chicago Bears. This is not a secret, people. I said last week, I hope they just go burn and crash and everything goes down. And I still stand by that. I'm still not overly convinced with Caleb Williams adjusting to the NFL yet. I know we're only 4 weeks in. Longtime listeners of the podcast know I like a 3-year window before I officially judge people, but it's the Bears, so I'm going to judge them right now all the time. I'm not overly sold on Caleb Williams. I think he's still trying to play college football, and he's in the NFL. He has shown some improvement since week 1. Congratulations. It's not hard to do. I'm not confident that he's the leader that this team needs. Now, I do really like what the Bears defense has done. The Bears defense has allowed the Bears to win games. And we know in their first victory, the one that pisses me off the most because Caleb Williams gets sole credit for it, where the offense had 0 points and they had 24 points at the end of the game. It was all the defense and special teams. There was nothing that the Bears offense did that inspired me. He's still trying to figure some stuff out. I think he's way too arrogant to be on this. Well, I think his arrogance is perfect for the Bears, just not for the NFL. And so I'm down on the Bears. I will always be down on the Bears. They could be 17-0 going into the Super Bowl, and I will be down on the Bears.
How do you really feel?
I'm down on the Bears for a different reason. Their offensive line still continues to be just horrific. I still think that Caleb Williams will end up being the best quarterback from this class, even with what Jaden Daniels has done. I have a lot of faith in just his arm strength and his arm accuracy that he showed. I don't know why he's not as accurate this year. Like, he's missing shots that he just wasn't missing in college, and I don't think someone's accuracy just all of a sudden goes away unless you're Chuck Knobloch for the late 90s Yankees. And the offensive line just has not given him anytime. And yes, he does try to scramble a little bit too much. He also is forced to scramble a little bit, but as long as that offensive line is intact as it is, like, he's never going to be able to put up or do what he needs to do. And they did just a bunch of short, quick passing game stuff in this win against the Rams. They hardly ever had him go downfield. I think that's partially because of the offensive line. I think that's also because they want to start to get him, see maybe if getting him into a rhythm can kind of like kickstart what he was able to do with some of these deep down the field intermediate passes. He's looked a lot like, I mean, Anthony Richardson has for the Colts, with missing some of those throws, but I just feel like his accuracy will be there. But as long as the offensive line for the Bears is playing, it's gonna be a rough go for Chicago.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go as I talk about the Bears here with this idea. For me, it is the quarterback and the quarterback's maturation. I was trying to look it up and I can't find it, but I saw somewhere somebody had a quarterback rankings, and two of the things I thought were of note to me was the very top ranking was called the Patrick Mahomes ranking, but Patrick Mahomes was in the second ranking. So in the
That's
Patrick
funny.
Mahomes was Sam Darnold and I feel like there was one other one. I can't remember. I was looking for it. But then you go down and down and they had all these like quirky names for their ranks. So it wasn't like a true ranking. It was like some dude like making fun of. You get way down and there's like one called Young and Reckless, and it was Anthony Richardson and Caleb Williams. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But I do have more faith in Anthony Richardson kind of toning down his recklessness and like being able to rely on the rest of his game. Right now, I feel like Caleb Williams, and it all comes down to like the humility of, I have more to learn. And I feel like Anthony Richardson has that more than Caleb Williams. And that kind of goes to what Brandon was talking about, that kind of pride. when
Arrogance.
you hear them talk, Caleb Williams does not feel like he's got much more to learn. He's just got to get it, right? Whereas Anthony Richardson is like, you can tell he's like, I'm trying to get better. I realize there's more I need to do. And, and I think you're going to see that plays out a little bit. I don't agree that I think he's going to be better than Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels was probably the one that should have been picked first. That's just my opinion though. But obviously that's other people thought he should have been because he was picked first. And so,
well, let's remember, we want to give these quarterbacks 3 years to fully develop. Their first year, they're going to figure out the NFL. They're going to figure out how fast it is.
Injured in their fourth game.
Yeah, that happens too. Their
or
second
the preseason.
Or the preseason, right?
Yeah, and so unless you're Caleb Williams, I'm not going to judge you too fast. I'll just leave it there. All right, our last 2-2 team, we have the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to start this one. I think they're still on the up. I'm never going to count out Kyle Shanahan. He has proven time and time again he could throw people from Walmart and his team and still have success. I know Josh talked about Matt LaFleur's play calling. Matt LaFleur's development all came under Kyle Shanahan. And so I see a lot of the stuff in the 49ers that the Packers do, and also the Rams and now the Vikings with your new head coach from last season. And I'm never going to count that out. You could put Bo Nix back there, which I'm not sure Brock Purdy would have the same level of success as a New York Giant. I'm just not. And I think he just does exceptionally well with what he has on the field, and he knows how to pair that against what the defense has on the field better than anyone in the NFL. Truly an offensive mastermind that we see every week. And I'm just never going to count them out. It's like what Josh said with Matt LaFleur. They could be 2-14 going into the last game and he's going to still make it to the playoffs. It's that impressive. And I get inspired watching their games and not going to count them out.
And on the other side of the ball, I think they have the best defensive player in football with Fred Warner. He does so much for them. So I echo all of that. And I think their defense is still excellent as well. So 49ers on the up and up.
And I'm going to play off that in that when D'Amico Ryans left and went to the Texans, I was really watching. I'm like, is that defense going to fall apart? Because 49ers have always had like this really stout defense, and it didn't fall apart. And with all of the stuff they have on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, the fact that you get Christian McCaffrey is just ridiculous when you're already good, and then you pull that in. But even with that, I think, like you said, I think it's the play calling that really puts them over the top. It doesn't matter like what their pieces are. Yeah, they have Debo, and yeah, they have McCaffrey, and yeah, they have all these, but it's true that like you pull pieces out and put other pieces in, and it still seems to work. And that's because of the play calling. So I also agree on the rise. And in their division, the Seahawks started really hot and are playing well. That's going to be their main right now. The Cardinals and Rams do not seem to be giving them any fight. So I think they have room to even still take that division.
Yeah. I do want to bring up one of our 3-1 teams as requested by Josh Haupt. We've alluded to them a number of times, the Washington Commanders. Josh texted me, when was this? On Tuesday. He said, dude, you need to go over the Washington Commanders in the podcast for me. Since he's not here, I figure we could just take 2 or 3 minutes and talk about him. Josh wanted to point out that I'll say this verbatim. You can go over stuff like how the Commanders only have 1 turnover through 4 games, have only punted like 5 times, in parentheses, if that, and the offense is top 10 in the league statistically, maybe even top 5. That's Josh's official analysis of the Commanders, and he's right. And I think we talked about it last week, where in terms of perfect drives through games, Jaden Daniels already has 2 where they just never punted in a case where they needed to punt, and they just scored, which is a really high indicator of success for winning football games. If your offense scores on every drive, you're going to win games. It's hard to beat that. And so the Washington Commanders have looked really, really well. My official vote for Rookie of the Year is going to be Jaden Daniels. Not that I actually get a vote, but my official vote is Jaden Daniels. So far through the season, I think he's come into this team and really shown proper leadership for a quarterback.
And credit to that offensive line and what Cliff Kingsbury and whoever Washington's offensive line coach is, because that offensive line was terrible last year, and it is excellent in keeping Jaden Daniels upright. And I think they also deserve a lot of the credit. And they're running the ball really well. Even without Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson, and Jeremy McNichols this last week, that offensive line is really getting it done right now, whereas it did not do that at all last season.
Yeah, you take away that whatever happened in the first week with Tampa Bay, and you do see a team that. So when they played New York, I was like, okay, they beat New York. I think most people could do it. Most people, I think a lot of teams are going to do that. They beat the Bengals. I'm like, oh, maybe the Bengals aren't where I thought they were. Then they beat the Cardinals, which, that was that Cliff Kingsbury kind of reunion game. I think we're going to really start to see who they are as they get down to like Baltimore Ravens, and but as I look at the rest of their games coming up, they've got Cleveland Browns, they've got Carolina Panthers, they've got Chicago Bears, they got New York Giants again, then Pittsburgh Steelers might be something, Philadelphia Eagles, I don't know, Tennessee Titans at the end. They've got a really good schedule ahead of them.
Yeah.
So I do think they're going to do well this year. I do think they're going to take that division.
Yeah. I'm going to put 2 more points in here from Josh of what he wanted us to cover. He said, just kind of go over the factual stuff. I feel like we just did that. Also put in your 2 cents on how Jaden Daniels is better than Caleb Williams. I felt like I've been doing that all podcast. So
the other Josh, your alter ego Josh, is not agreeing.
I still think Jaden Daniels is very, very, very good.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I think Caleb Williams. I just like Caleb Williams to end up in 3 years as a tinge better than Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
Here's my biggest thing against Caleb Williams. Whenever I look at him, I think of the weekend.
I think of Karl Anthony Towns, the Timberwolves player. He looks and talks exactly like him.
Like him, okay. Or
I guess not the Timberwolves player, the New York Knicks player now.
There you go.
Yeah.
You look like you had something else you wanted to say.
Sorry, no,
about that.
he was no. Well, he was traded this weekend, so yeah.
So
anyway.
let's move from these 2-2 teams. We've talked about the ones we thought would be rising, the ones we thought would be falling. We'll watch over the rest of this season to see how much of that actually is accurate and where we messed up. But I want to get to our homer games, and I feel like we're going to start with the one that's going to take the least talk, and that is Indianapolis and Pittsburgh. We at least a couple of us, I can't remember, Brandon, what you thought, but at least a couple of us thought Indy was going to get the win in this one. Do you remember what you thought last week?
I think I was on the Pittsburgh train.
Pittsburgh winning. And they did get the win, and it felt like they had a bigger win than the actual score looked like at the end. It was like a 3-point game at the end, but like they started off really good offensively. The first drive down the field was just like so great. And then, at some point, Anthony Richardson got hurt and went out, and Joe Flacco came in and continued. But what I would like to point out about this game that was impressive to me is the fact that, okay, we talked about Jason Kelce and how it's hard to replace that center. The center is like such an important part. Ryan Kelly did not play this week, and we put a guy who never took a snap in the NFL, brand new guy, Tanner Bortolini, in, and that guy looked really good. That was very heartening to me. I mean, not just looked good, but he looked really good. That first drive down the field, he was the one opening up the holes for Jonathan Taylor to run through, and I was excited to see that. So I agree with what Josh said earlier. When you have a good offensive line, that really says a lot about where I think the team is going to go. And I know we had like a great offensive line, and then there were a few years where it didn't look so good, where they were trying to figure out the pieces in there aside from Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly. So when Ryan Kelly went out, he's been like one of our, stalwart pieces there in the center. To see this guy, Tanner Bortolini, come in and just like manhandle people, to come in and just like do, catch the assignments, to call what was going on. And it just, I was like, that is great. And not to mention, we had so many. Buckner out, Kenny Moore out, AR went out, and Jonathan Taylor ended up going out, and we still won this game. Not to mention Samson Ebicam and Kwity Paye was out, Taekwon Lewis. We have a lot of injury stuff happening, and to see them come in and still do what they needed to do, because that Pittsburgh defense is not a slouch. At least they haven't been, but they didn't stop the Colts, and that was really good to see, whether it was AR or Joe Flacco. Now, do I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are our junk team and they were just horrible and we beat them? No. I feel like Justin Fields almost did everything he needed to do to come back in that game, and at the end, I was like, no, because those last two drives, he just like put the team on his back and he started going, and he was running and getting touchdowns. And I'm like, please stop. But I think Justin Fields may have found his place. I don't know that Russell Wilson's going to come back into that offense. I think Fields probably, even with that loss, I think he basically sewed up, I'm the starting quarterback for this team. And I do expect them to do great things. Are they one of the 2-2 teams we talked about?
They are one of the, yeah. Yep.
I forget what I said about them,
yeah,
but
no,
I feel
yeah,
like
you like
they're
them.
on the rise. Yeah.
And I said something similar. So the only one thing that I want to add, and I'm speaking directly to Shane Steichen right now, head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. When your franchise quarterback gets injured on a play,
you don't do a run option where he runs.
The very next time he comes in, he played one play after his initial injury, and it's not Anthony Richardson scrambling around and being reckless. It's a designed quarterback run. Don't do that again, please.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going on with that. I'm like, what, did he think he was going to totally catch him off guard because they wouldn't expect that?
Right.
Even so, and everybody's like, oh no, he's out for the season again. It was the fourth game last year, right? Fourth game this year, and I'm like, don't put him back in. And then he does that design run, and I'm like, what? But I think he might be back for this week. Bruise hip. Hopefully all is well. Yeah, I agree with you. Shane Steichen, listen to him. But anyway, yeah, I thought the game went went well, as well as you can feel when your starting quarterback goes out of the game. And I feel like he probably could have come back later in the game. He was having trouble accelerating when they first put him back, but you could have put him back and done a lot of handoffs and short throws, a lot of things to like not designed runs. I feel like he probably could have finished that game if he needed to, but they saw Flacco was doing what he needed to do. And I do applaud Shane for saying, no, we're going to shut him down for today, because I think in the past he would have put him back in again, and then there could have been those injuries. To at least have that presence of mind, it's like, let's not injure our starting quarterback for no good reason. So
for a third time in this game.
Right. So anyway, Jonathan Taylor, he feels like he's going to be back. He had that kind of mild high ankle sprain, which high ankle sprains are never good, but it seems like it's not a severe one. So if we can get those guys back, that'll be good. But I felt like it was a good game, and it was a good game by our defense. It was a good game by our offense to see them out there. Michael Pittman got involved again, which was good to see, because he was like kind of invisible for the first 3 weeks. And then in this game, he was out there snagging them, and that was good. Yeah. I don't know if I'm missing anything that I wanted to talk about, but overall, I feel like with all the injuries, to come out with that win, as much as I hated that it got so close at the end, it was good to at least hold them to that and win. Let's move on. Unless you guys have anything to say about Indy, Pittsburgh.
No?
Nope, nothing else.
Okay. Let's move to the other game, the one that'll probably take more time to talk about. Packers versus Vikings. This was going to be a big one. We had last week, we had two different thoughts on how this game might go. Brandon thought the Packers might win. Josh thought the Vikings might win. I didn't say. I waffled and played non-committal the whole time. And so now we know how it actually turned out. Tell me what happened in the game. Let's start with Brandon. Then we'll let Josh, since Josh is going to have the victory part of the speech, he gets to go last.
Overall, the Packers lost. We do know this, and I'm not really upset. Well, I am a little upset with the loss. It's hard to see your team lose, but I'm not upset with the loss after the end of the game. I'm upset with the first half of the game. So as Josh knows, any Vikings fan that's out there or any Packers hater, that first half was rough. It was, as a Packers fan, we couldn't get anything going on the ground. We couldn't get anything going through the air. We missed 2 field goals. And the defense was just not stopping any offensive production. It reminded me of what Josh said of, it seemed like previously, before this current regime of coaches that we have in Minnesota and Green Bay, the first game of the season, one team would just wipe the face off the other team and it wouldn't be a close game. And the second game, exact same thing, but the other team wipes their face off. I thought the game was going to be close at the end. I was right. It was within 2 points, 3 points.
29-31, right? 30. Oh,
yeah, 2 points.
It's 2 points.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which, as a Packers fan, is a field goal that we missed 2 of. I know I don't like to just put in, if we made those 2 field goals, we're guaranteed a win of the game, because that obviously changes the structure of the Minnesota offense and the Packers defense. It changes a lot of stuff. I can't just say if we made those 2 field goals, it was an automatic win, because Minnesota would have come back with a different response offensively and defensively, as the Packers would have offensively and defensively. So I don't feel good about saying if our kicker was perfect, we would have won. Things I did really enjoy about the game. The Packers came back in the second half really strong. And I mean, it was looking really good. Jordan Love was making passes. The offense was blocking. The defense was actually stopping the offense. In one of the touchdowns Minnesota had to Justin Jefferson in entering the end zone, Justin was perfectly covered. Yeah. The ball placement was absolutely perfect, and Justin Jefferson did what he needed to do as a receiver. That's what I love to see happen during those matchups. The Packers could have done absolutely nothing to stop that. They had perfect coverage. Kudos to Minnesota on that. Sam Darnold, perfect ball placement. Justin Jefferson, perfect catch. I have no issues with that. A few of the other times were just not on receivers is bothersome. And I know part of that was Jair Alexander did not play the game. and they like to target that area where Jair traditionally is. I am proud. Xavier McKinney got his 4th pick of the season. He's 4 for 4 in 4 games. I know there's some controversy. It doesn't look like he fully had control of the ball going down. Again, it's not going to change the outcome of the game. The NFL refs ruled it the way it was. We just accept it and move on from there. So Xavier McKinney, I'm proud of what he was able to do. In the second half, Packers, I was really proud of how they bounced back within that game. It's always tough to lose to a divisional opponent. Losing by 2 points hurts a little bit more, but the Packers' response throughout the game is what I'm most proud of. I'm not counting the Packers out by any means, as we talked about in the 2-2 section. And I'm excited for our next matchup.
Yeah, it should be a fun one the next time these two teams meet. And hopefully Jair Alexander is back, because I think him, and then who's the second quarterback or second cornerback for the Packers that also missed the game? Was it Carrington?
Yeah, Carrington Valentine.
So I think that made a huge difference in the game, like you said. Keyshawn Nixon got better as the game went on. He was on Jefferson on that stuck on Rice, stuck like white on Rice on that play that you're talking about. But the first touchdown to Jordan Addison, he bites on the double move. The touchdown reverse to Jordan Addison, he misses a tackle. So it took him a little bit to get into the game. He makes big plays later on in the game, like that forced fumble on Sam Darnold, and playing perfect coverage. Like you said, it was just a pinpoint ball. And then Jefferson knows he can't get his hands out, so he just lets it pinball off of his chest. And as a receiver, typically you're told, don't catch the ball with your chest, but he's just using it like you would use a backboard, like you're making a layup, and you're just boom, boom into your arms. And he's done that a couple of times so far this year on touchdown. So I think that played a big difference. And in that first half, there were even some shots that Sam Darnold missed that he was looking right at. And it's getting me a little bit more worried about Sam Darnold, not because of some of the decisions that he made. First drive, he probably could have had an interception before the touchdown. He threw it to, I believe it was McDuffie, and McDuffie just dropped it. But it was a tough play. And then I know there was the controversy with the replay. If it was an turnover worthy play by Sam Darnold. I would be more angry if it was some incredible play that should have been called out of bounds, that deserved to be intercepted. I feel like that's a little bit of football karma or whatever. But there were some plays that he didn't make that he's looking deep downfield on one of these plays in the second quarter. It was the only drive the Vikings hadn't scored on in that second quarter. And the Packers are playing with 2 safeties covering different halves of the field. And the Vikings, with 2 receivers on the same side, both run deep routes, with Justin Jefferson going more towards the middle on the post, and then Brandon Powell going deep. And it's designed to beat that cover 2. It's designed to put one of those safeties into conflict. And it does just that. The safety, Sam Darnold, is looking at it. He's supposed to throw it to whoever the safety doesn't go to. And he's looking at it the whole way. It's a long developing play. They have the offensive line set up. And he just kind of continues to hop around in the pocket and looked scared to throw it as soon as the safety went towards Justin Jefferson. Brandon Powell sprinting wide open. And I know that can be kind of nitpicky, but there were other instances like that, especially in the first half, where he's just not firing the trigger. Still, I'm still confident in him, but the Kolodziejski coalition is beginning to get some concerns about Sam Darnold as it relates to the rest of the season, if he's not able to hit that concept. And I get there are plays where receivers run wide open that the quarterback misses, but that was the concept. That was the design of the play, was to do that, and he was looking at it and he didn't hit it. I am a little bit worried about the defense, especially Byron Murphy. Even though he had an interception and he punched the ball out, he was out of position on a lot of the cover 4 or cover 2 that the Vikings were playing. He would bite to the inside, and that would leave a receiver open. And part of that's just Matt LaFleur's scheme. I'm very, very pleased with how the Vikings did, especially in that first half. And I just need Sam Darnold to be there was another throw. Jordan Addison, he made a leaping catch, but if he puts it out in front of Jordan Addison in that third quarter, there was not a safety near him. And so there were just some plays that I didn't like, some mistakes that we made. And I'm a little bit worried with the Jets and the Lions coming up next on our schedule that it might be a 4-2 team. But I still have faith that Kevin O'Connell, who I also like as a play caller and just as like a personality as well, can talk to Sam Darnold and get him back on track.
Good game. And I think the next game will also be one of these where it's like, who's going to come out on top? And we'll see if it's one of those where we split the season like you guys so often do, you guys, Packers and Vikings. So good homer games this week. Let's look where things are going. Let's actually look forward to next week's games. I want to know, what are the games people need to watch? What's the marquee game this week? What's the manure game that's just not going to be any good? And what's your surprise, my oh my game? Let's start with Josh this week.
All right, my marquee game is going to be Bills and Texans. Sometimes you go to the movie theater to watch a really technical, artsy film that might not be a great plot, and then that's like 2001: A Space Odyssey is just really boring to me. But it's like well made. Everything's good about it. From a technical film aspect. Sometimes you just want to go see Ocean's 13 and see some of the best actors in the business just do what they want to do and make a fun movie. And that's what I think this Bills Texans game. Not that they're not going to have good technical aspects to it, but like we've got George Clooney, we've got Brad Pitt, we've got Matt Damon with Josh Allen, CJ Stroud, Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins. It's like the stars are here. So when I think marquee, that's what I'm thinking. And like the offenses, both like have been really good this season. I know Houston got into a little bit of a funk after that Minnesota game, but they still seemed like they figured it out against Jacksonville. Most of the time that there were stops on those drives was because of penalties committed by Laramie Tunsil again, who just continues to play good in pass protection, but then for whatever reason just can't get the timing of the snap down. But I think it is going to be an offensive, masterpiece, and it's going to be like 34-37, even though there are some good defense. Like the Texans, credit to them, they have Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, so that's going to be tough for Josh Allen to deal with. He's a tough guy to bring down, so it's a lot of just like fun moving parts where I think even your most casual of football fans would want to watch this game, and it could be a playoff preview. It could be an AFC championship preview.
Yeah, let's hope not, because we don't want the Texans that high. But I'm going to go next. So there were lots of games I was like thinking of choosing as I went through here. But I think I'm going to go with one that probably is not on, well, maybe it's on some people's radar because of Minnesota, but it's Minnesota Jets. And the reason I say that is because, yes, Jets scored 9 points and didn't win last week, but it was raining like crazy. And I think Aaron Rodgers at the end of that, when the towel was over his head, you saw somebody who is like, I do not want a repeat of that this next week. And so I'm excited to see what exactly that looks like when they go into Minnesota. Hopefully it'll be dry, right? Yeah, hopefully.
Oh, it's in London. They're playing in London this week.
So it may not be dry, man. London's known for its rain. But I do look forward to see like what happens after that bad game for the Jets. How do they respond to that? And you've already talked about the fact that you're not sure what you feel if they're going to win this or not. I think this is going to be a fun game to watch, and I'm excited about that. Yeah, it's at 8:30 a.m. That's at London. Man, I hate those games.
Sam Darnold revenge game.
The Sam Darnold revenge game. So yeah, he's coming back to New York Jets, and Aaron Rodgers is trying to beat a team he's very familiar with. As long as he has the cast around him to do it. Who knows by then? Well, not by then. They won't have Devontae Adams by then. So that'll have to wait. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's what I'm going with this week. How about you, Brandon?
I tried really hard this week to find 3 games that are going to be off the normal beaten path. So my marquee game I'm going to go with. We also have this week, I don't know if anyone noticed, a good number of divisional matchups, which I'm always big on divisional matchups. Those are always good games. And I'm going to choose one of those divisional matchups for my marquee game. It's going to be Buccaneers at Falcons, actually. And I know we talked about the Falcons are not a team right now that's overly inspiring to us, but I like the Falcons and what they've been able to do at home with glimpses of what I know they can do. I want them to come through and execute that. And I also want the Buccaneers to come through and execute what we've seen Baker Mayfield do with that offense so far this year. Mike Evans just broke some historical NFL record that he's not supposed to break because he's outside of Tom Brady, his short time with him, never really had a competent quarterback. I mean, you're talking Jameis Winston, you're talking Baker Mayfield. These are guys that are not going to go in Canton. These are just guys that were out there slinging the ball. Mike Evans, to me, he's going to Canton. He's been able to do so much with so little, and he's going to come through and just carve up this Falcons defense, and really any defense he plays until he retires. He's so good. And I'm expecting a high power offensive game out of both of these teams, which to me and the NFL revenue is exciting. You know, when there's more points, there's more money spent, and the NFL's happy.
All right, let's move to our manure game. And I think I'm going to start this one. Why not? Which one did I pick? Here's my, yes, I picked Miami at New England with Miami's current health problems. Everybody injured. I mean, just the fact that they lost to the Tennessee Titans last week, that's not what I would have expected from this team at the beginning of the year. If you would have said, yeah, Miami's going to lose that. I mean, it just looked like everything was looking good and up, and can Tua stay, up on the field without getting a concussion? But right now, neither one of these teams are inspiring. Jacoby Brissett is in there basically because they know the offensive line is so bad, they're not going to put Drake May back there. They're going to be like, let's let Jacoby, this is Jacoby's life. He comes into a place where it's like, well, whoever's back there is just going to get hit a lot, going to get beat up. They're not going to win probably a lot. Let's use him until we start to get that better. Then we'll put our guy back there. That's Jacoby's life. That's what he's got here in New England. And then Miami, they just have all these injuries, and I'm just not inspired by either team. I think that's going to be a manure game.
I'll go second on this one. For me, Josh, you're still getting to know me a little bit. On these manure games, I have a really hard time just picking the two worst teams.
Right.
Because I remember watching a game when I was a young boy of Cleveland, Detroit, which historically is not going to be a very exciting matchup. But when I watched that game, I felt more inspired, not because it was an overly dominated game, but because it was an even game between two really bad teams.
Anybody could have still won.
And so I have a really hard time for manure games, just picking really two bad teams, because I can still get inspired from those games and there's still stuff to learn. My manure games historically have been a team that I think is just going to dominate the game. And that's what I picked this week. I have the Cowboys going to Pittsburgh. We talked about, we think the Cowboys are down this year. Justin Fields is going to want to come back and all of that Pittsburgh organization and staple a win so they can say, hey, we are the team that you still want to beat. Last week was a fluke. And if you're going to want to win in the playoffs, we want it to come through Pittsburgh, and you're going to have to come to us to do it. And I think they staple a win pretty handily against the Dallas Cowboys this week.
I'm going to go with Raiders and Broncos. And like, I guess these two teams are evenly matched, but I feel like we're just going to see the Raiders run into the line of scrimmage a bunch, and the Broncos have Bo Nix go dump down a pass 5 yards beyond the line. I feel like there's nothing more to that game than this. It's just Bo Nix with the checkdowns, the Raiders with a failure to get any sort of run game going, and putting more pressure on Gardner Minshew, who's not going to have his top weapon with Devontae Adams. I like defensive games, but I think in this case, it's like, if it's a low scoring game, it's going to be more because the offenses are inept and not because the defenses are particularly doing anything super well. So I'm not sold on that game. All
right. For our my, oh my, since we had Josh start one and then I started one, we'll have Brandon start this one.
This one, I'm looking straight at another divisional matchup. I'm going to the AFC North. I have the Ravens going to Cincinnati. To me, these are both teams that got off to a really rocky start so far this season. Cincinnati is looking to add one more win to their belt. I know the Ravens are a team we just talked about is 2-2. We think they're on the up and up. We didn't talk about those with the 1-3 teams, but I'm not counting out the Bengals. I think this is going to be a closer match than some people expect. I know the Ravens have the ability to have a massive run game between Lamar and Derrick Henry, and Lamar can also throw the ball really, really well, and that's going to be exciting to watch. But I'm not going to write out Cincinnati at home in this game. This is the game I'm going to want to tune into to watch if it's on my cable.
Okay, Josh, you go next.
I'm really interested to see the Colts and Jaguars game. I like when I watched back the Jaguars game against the Texans, I'm seeing Trevor Lawrence with a little bit of the yips, missing some open receivers, but those receivers getting really, really open against good cornerbacks like Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley Jr. And I have seen Trevor Lawrence in the NFL make those accurate passes. So eventually I would assume those yips go away. Maybe that's a poor assumption to make. And maybe that, maybe they just don't. And Trevor Lawrence continues to be stuck in the mire that he is in for the rest of his career. I think he's going to have a fun game against the Colts. And I think Anthony Richardson is also going to do the same against a Jaguars defense that hasn't been great this year, especially now that we've seen, and I get it's a 2-drive sample size this last week, but he was making throws. He was hitting his wide receivers in tighter windows than we've seen Anthony Richardson hit his wide receivers. I think this has the potential to be kind of like another high-scoring, fun game to watch that maybe you don't expect it to be. And even though the Jaguars are 0-4, like we said, I think they're a little bit better than their 0-4 record suggests. I don't think they're the worst team in the NFL. And I think Trevor Lawrence, it's probably too late for him to turn it on, but I think he is going to turn it on here in the coming weeks.
I'm definitely going to be watching that game, and I happen to think the Colts defense is going to step up strong against Trevor Lawrence, but we'll see. That'll be exciting. So I picked a different team. I actually picked one that Brandon picked as his marquee, and that is Pittsburgh, Dallas. For me, that's a my kind of a what's going to happen in this game, because I don't think it's one team so far and away. And I know that Pittsburgh was 3-0 last week, and I felt like that 3-0 was maybe a little inflated because I think Justin Fields was still growing and their defense was holding them. Now their defense has shown some holes, and Dallas is going to be looking at what did the Colts do to stop that. I think it's going to be a closer game. I don't think this is going to be that one team dominates the other team like maybe Brandon was expecting. But I do look for Justin Fields to continue growing, and I do think every week it feels like he grows. Even though they lost last week and they're no longer undefeated, I felt like he grew in what he was doing. In those last 2 drives, he showed some, he didn't get crazy and throw it into triple coverage and get interceptions like he used to do, even though they were down. And even though things, the defense wasn't putting a stop to the Colts, he didn't just freak out like he has in the past. And so I'm looking for him to continue that. I do think Pittsburgh is going to win, but I do think that it's going to be maybe a little tougher and closer than expected. So that's going to be my game this week. I don't know if we have anything else. We used to talk about fantasy stuff here. Anything you want to say about that before we go, Brandon?
Josh is in charge of the voting now. Please vote.
A different Josh, not Josh.
Josh Haupt.
He's in charge of that. Vote. Who's in the lead right now in our fantasy league?
I'll tell you. Let me look it up.
I think I can tell you who's in the very last spot. That would be Matthew Thomas, who drafted all Colts this year as an experiment of fun. Starting with Jonathan Taylor was the only way to draft all Colts because somebody would have drafted him. But I got him, and then I knew my mission was before me, and I got them. But I am in last place with 0 wins. Who's in first place?
We have someone 4-0, undefeated. We got Dirty Birds Cody. Congratulations. You've been at second the past couple of weeks. You've gone up to first.
Wait, who was undefeated?
Cody.
Oh,
Cody is the only undefeated.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Cody with Dirty Birds. And then we got a slew of 4 3-1 teams. We got Winston Warriors at second. Dylan, congrats. I've been telling everyone Dylan's really good. Everyone's been writing him out. Ope, let me screen right past you. We got Brian 3-1. We have Diamond Dogs with myself at 3-1, and Bringing the Pain with Josh Haupt as our last 3-1 team.
There you go. So that's kind of a rundown. For all of you who don't care about our fantasy football, now you know. Just before we leave, here's what I'm going to do. Your game this week, who's going to win, you or the other team? I'm going to say the Colts are going to beat the Jags.
Packers beat the beaten up Rams.
Yeah, Vikings beat the Jets.
Look at that. We're all feeling wins coming this week. So that's going to be it for us here on the Football Fandemic. Join us next time as we see if those predictions actually do come true or not. We'll see you next time. Thanks.